Hi everyone, Paul here from familywheels.ca with another car review for your growing family. And this week we're in a car that's new to the Hyundai family, the 2017 Elantra Sport. This is the most powerful Elantra ever to make its way into the Hyundai lineup, and it's a bit of a nod to the fact that Hyundai is trying to draw in those buyers who want to have a bit more fun in their cars. And they're taking a page now from a lot of their competitors who have a performance division and launching their N division. Now this is not an N division car. We don't have any products from the N division quite available yet in Canada, but it is heading in that direction. Don't think of the Elantra Sport so much as, a competitor to the Ford Focus RS or the Honda Civic Type R. They're much more nuts, much more harsh vehicles to drive. This is more of a middle ground. It's still got great value, but it's just got a little bit more kick. So it more lines up with the likes of the Ford Focus ST or the Honda Civic Si. But don't get me wrong here, this is not just your regular Elantra with some flashy badging. It has a different engine, it has different transmissions, it has a different sport-tuned suspension, different steering feel. It has also tons of standard features. It's loaded to the gills, as Hyundai always does so well. So let's take this thing for a spin. We drove around the regular Elantra this time last year. I want to see how this thing stacks up compared to that this week on Family Wheels. So when I say the standard equipment in this car is good, I'm not lying. This thing, when I stepped into our test vehicle here this week, I thought to myself, oh, for the top of the line trim, it's missing a couple of things I wish it had. But this is actually the base trim of the Elantra Sport. It comes in at $1 short of 25 grand here in Canada. Let me rattle off this list of standard features because it's an impressive one. From the outside, we have some slightly different bodywork. The front end and back end look a bit sportier, some body moldings on the side of the vehicle as well. We have high-intensity headlights as standard on the Elantra Sport. We have this chrome-tipped exhaust, and we have 18-inch alloy wheels. So it looks good from the outside. Hop inside here, we have a 7-inch infotainment system with a backup camera. We have leather seating surfaces. These are also sport-inspired bucket seats up front. They're very firm, yet they're supportive. I'm really liking these seats this week. We have heated front seats. We have this D-cut sport-inspired steering wheel. It's also a heated steering wheel as standard. Sunroof comes standard as well. There's push-button start, there's a proximity key, there's a smart trunk that opens up automatically with your key fob. You have rear cross-traffic alert with the use of that backup camera, so it will alarm if you're about to back into someone. You have blind spot monitoring. The list in this car at 25 grand is one of the most impressive that I've seen, not to mention the fact that you've got this much more sport-minded 1.6-liter turbocharged engine on board. It puts out 201 horsepower. It's a very smooth delivery of power as well. Sometimes in these smaller turbos, I find that we get a little bit of a lag to get this car really performing. Actually, I didn't think at first when I got into this that it was a turbo because it doesn't have that lag like we saw in, say, the WRX that we were in a few weeks ago. That car had two personalities. When you were just cruising along, and once you get it up to 3,000 RPM, it all of a sudden just became a beast. It came to life. This car is just a steady power all the time with this little turbo. Another thing that's different here in this car versus the regular Elantra is this multi-link independent rear suspension. It means that here on these windy country roads that I'm testing these vehicles out on this week, it really does glue itself to the road nicely, and it feels like a far more expensive car than the price tag would suggest. A big part of that too is the superstructure that the regular Elantra and this car share. It's something that Hyundai has been bragging about for a while. It gives you a lot more torsional rigidity, but one thing I will say is that Hyundai was saying that this should also help with road noise here in this car, but in the regular Elantra I found the same thing when I was testing it last year. We hit about 66 decibels at 100 kilometers an hour this week with our decibel reader test. That's certainly on the noisier end, and it may be a bit better than the previous version, but it certainly could be a lot better still. But here's a number that really impresses me in the Elantra Sport, and that's its fuel economy. Last year when we were driving around that regular Elantra, we averaged about 7.6 liters per 100 kilometers over a week of driving. That was mostly in the city that week. This car, when I was driving it around the city, we averaged 7.8 liters per 100 kilometers, so a very negligible difference. And once we got this car onto the highway, I've averaged about 6.5 liters per 100 kilometers. So these are numbers that are really impressive when you consider that we've got over 200 200 horsepower, 201 horsepower under the hood, and 195 foot-pounds of torque as well. That's what gives you that pull that I'm talking about, and that's a decent amount of torque for a car of this size. It gives you that steady delivery of power without giving you that lag, and you've still got an excellent fuel economy number to go alongside that. That's really impressive. Now, speaking of that torque, that pull that this little turbocharged engine offers you, there are a couple of things performance-wise that bother me about the Elantra Sport. First up is that it does have a bit of torque steer going on. And this is hard to avoid in a more sport-oriented front-wheel drive car because you're putting all the power through those front wheels, but it also is where you're steering from. So the steering wheel tends to dance around in your hands a little bit. It does feel a little bit skittish. But if we compare this to something like, say, the Subaru WRX, which is all-wheel drive, then you're going to avoid some of that torque steer that you're dealing with here in a car like this. Another thing that I think is not helping with that torque steer feel is that it does have a fairly light steering feel in this car, and that's despite the fact that Hyundai says they've tuned the steering in this car to be a bit more sport-minded. If it were me, I'd like a bit of a heavier steering feel in a car like this. But one thing that Hyundai got just right here with the Elantra Sport is its exhaust note. You can't hear it so much here in the cabin, but when you're outside, it has this perfect little burble that's just perfect for its personality. It really does make you want to shift through the gears and hear that note every now and then, put down the windows to really enjoy it. Now, speaking of shifting through the gears, you have a couple of options here in this car that again are unique to this vehicle. First up is a 6-speed manual gearbox like we have here in our tester. Again, this comes on the base trim, and if you want to get into a DCT, a dual clutch transmission, a 7-speed automatic transmission that's an option here in this car, expect to spend about an extra $1,500. And then if you want to get into the higher level trim, the Sport Tech trim that's available to you in the Elantra Sport, you can top out in that vehicle with the DCT for about 29 grand. You're getting a larger infotainment system screen, you're getting automatic dual zone climate control, auto dimming rear mirrors, but really this car is so well kitted out at its base price that for me, because I like driving a stick, I would go for that $25,000 price tag and just go with the base vehicle on the Elantra Sport because it really doesn't disappoint in terms of what you're getting for your dollar. Well, as soon as I stepped into the interior here on the Elantra Sport, there were a couple of things that stood out for me right away. Some good, some bad. First up is this carbon fiber inlay, which I really like, and I'm not always crazy about it in vehicles because sometimes it can kind of be cheap and shiny and plasticky, and I think it kind of cheapens the look of a vehicle. But here in this car, it's kind of got this dull, sort of open pore look to it, which is a bit different and looks kind of cool in my mind. I also like the instrument cluster for the driver. It's very European inspired, it's very basic, analog, and for a car like this that is meant to be a bit more of a driver's vehicle, I think that it fits the bill quite nicely. Now, when we glance over to the infotainment system, again, it's something that I think Hyundai has done a good job of. We have a 7-inch infotainment system screen on the lower level trims and an 8-inch screen on the higher level trims, but all trims come with Android Auto and Apple CarPlay as standard. And that means that you can use your smartphone, pretty much any smartphone, to use your in-phone navigation, contacts. You can access your music really easily, and this is something that Hyundai was ahead of the curve on. They've done a nice job with this system. Now, the seats do hug you really nicely through the corners. I've talked about the fact that I find them nice and supportive. They might be a bit firm for some people, but I really like them. But there's no lumbar support adjustment. So if you have a small of the back that you like to have a little bit more oomph in, a bit more support, there's no adjustment for that. And this doesn't really bother me that much, but some people might be bothered by it. It's not automatic or motorized seating. So you have to use the old school bars and sliders in order to adjust this seat just the way you like it. Now, speaking of just little things that bother me with this vehicle, while I do like this carbon fiber inlay, and I think that it kind of makes this car look a little bit different here on the interior, all around that carbon fiber, Hyundai's bad for this. We have these cheap plastics. If they'd made these plastics just a little bit higher grade, it would have made this car feel a lot more high-end. But despite the fact that this car is so well appointed in so many ways, there are a couple of things that are missing that you can't even get as an option, that we're seeing as more mainstream safety features in the competition. Even the regular Elantra has this as an option. We're talking about adaptive cruise control here, lane keeping assist, forward collision mitigation braking. Even the much, much cheaper Toyota Corolla now has that kind of equipment standard on all trims of that vehicle as of 2017. It's kind of strange to me that at least the higher level trims in the Elantra Sport don't have that as part of its kit. So the Elantra Sport's back seat is going to be exactly the same as the regular Elantra's seat. It was redesigned for this 6th generation, and it's gotten a little bit bigger, 2 inches of extra legroom, but it's still not a particularly spacious second row. My legroom's okay at 6'2". I'm kind of maxed out if I've got the driver's seat set for somebody who's 6'2", but you know, for kids back here, they're going to be all right. It's headroom that's definitely a little bit trickier. I noted this in the regular Elantra as well. Now, in terms of having kids back here, we do have these pinhole perforations in the leather and all trims of the Elantra Sport. These are tough to keep clean, but we do have, and this is nice to see for kids, these plastic guards on the backs of the front seats. And these mean that means that if you've got, you know, kids with muddy feet or whatever and they're kicking the backs of the seats, you're not going to scuff up your leather too badly. For car seats in this car, again, exactly the same as the regular Elantra. Front facing is just fine, but once we flip this kind of average sized rear facing car seat into place, I've had to slide the front passenger seat as far forward as it will go for it to sit in here safely, and that means that it's going to be pretty tight for you. According to our measurement from the back of the front seat cushion all the way up to the glove box, we've got 27 inches, and that's on kind of the average size for, you know, smaller sedans like this. But headroom's okay for me. At 6'2", though, my leg room's at a real premium. Shorter adults are going to be okay, but don't expect to be really comfortable in this car with rear facing car seats in place. Now let's take a look at our trunk in this car. Again, exactly the same as the regular Elantra, 407 liters, which is pretty respectable for a car of this size. You can see here that with our standardized trunk test, we've got a stroller fitting lengthwise. You don't have to flip it widthwise because it's a fairly deep trunk, so that's good news. We've also got a couple of bags of groceries, a diaper bag, a backpack, and a ball, and they all fit in here with a little bit of extra room to spare. You can also flip down the seats right here with these pull tabs, and that means that you'll get a little bit more extra cargo capacity in this car if you don't have anyone sitting in the back seats. It would be nice though, you can do that with this tab right here, but in a lot of other sedans you have the option of doing it from inside the cabin as well. Not the case here in the Elantra Sport, but in general not a bad trunk for a car of this size. Well, the Hyundai Elantra Sport is a great new addition to the more sport-minded compact sedan and hatchback segment. You've got great standard features in this car, and it's not quite as harsh as some of the other competitors in this segment too, so it's more forgiving for day-to-day life. But I would also give a good hard look at the Subaru WRX if you're looking at this segment, because for about $5,000 more, you're getting a lot more of a sporty feel. Fuel economy is not quite as good, interior noise is even louder, but you get Subaru's amazing all-wheel drive system and you get that extra bit of performance. But I'd like to know what your thoughts are on the Elantra Sport, how it does compared to the competition in this segment, if you think that it's going to be a really relevant choice, and maybe you're looking at this car compared to the regular Elantra. Which way are you going in terms of those two cars? Please leave a comment below, subscribe while you're at it, and then check out familywheels.ca where I put together a bullet point report card. Next week on the program, we're in another Hyundai vehicle, the Santa Fe. We'll see how that SUV does. That's in about 7 days from now. Until then, have a great week.